Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, and fellow citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization, which pays for this podcast, our wonderful website, our emails and text messages, and our donations to other conservative groups and individuals around the country, and is supported by our generous donors. If you can afford to support our organization, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the donate link and give what you can. For 16 years, our generous donors have provided us with the resources we needed to help save our nation and to do what this podcast is about, what our organization is about, which is to protect and defend your and my individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you've been with us for a long time, thank you for your loyalty and support. We greatly appreciate it, because now more than ever, you and I must defend our nation, must defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, because we are literally under attack. Now, for those of you who listen to this podcast routinely, you know about a month ago, before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I made it clear that we are in a hot civil war. What does that mean? That means shooting, killing, damage to property, things of that nature. And the Charlie Kirk assassination just put an exclamation point on that. But it's not ending. It's increasing. And you and I need to understand that it's going to continue to increase, because the more desperate the radical left becomes, the more willing they're going to be to use force. And we're going to document that for you in this podcast. And then we're going to take action to protect ourselves, but more importantly, to defeat them. We must defeat the radical left, the anti-American, communist-funded radical left. If you haven't figured this out yet, let me just state it for you. For those of you who are new, there is an element in this nation that is committed to the violent overthrow of the United States and then internationally of all Western governments. This is not a theory or an ideology or some college professor's proposal, though that's where it started. This is being implemented in real time, and it is a real threat to you and to me and our personal freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And so if you think it's going to, that Charlie Kirk's going to end it because people will come to their senses, yeah. Have you seen anyone on the left coming to their senses the past couple weeks? They're not. They're doubling and tripling down, and it's not just these shooters and the people who are literally mentally ill. It's the core. It is the leadership. It's Hakeem Jeffries and Tlaib and Schumer and all of them. Hillary Clinton. They are in an insurrection, right? The left always accuses you of what they're doing. They faked the insurrection, and we've got evidence of that we'll talk about, that I think you guys know about already in the podcast. They faked an insurrection, saying that we were the insurrectionists when they were stealing the 2020 election. There's no greater form of insurrection than stealing the presidential election. And now they're trying to destroy our country. They are the insurrection. You need to call them that. You need to point out that what they are doing is sedition. They are trying to violently overthrow the United States of America. Why? Because they tried to just take it over with propaganda and by lying to you and fooling you for decades. Okay, that they were the Democrat Party and they cared about you just like, the Republicans, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, except that whole time, Communist China was funding them and training them. As the leaders of Black Lives Matter said, we're trained Marxists, and our goal is the overthrow of the U.S. government. She said it out loud. We put the clips of it on this podcast. And people just like, oh, well, they don't really mean it. Just ignore that. No! Don't ignore that. Listen to them. So yeah, this has been going on for a long time and it ain't about to stop. Okay? It's not about to stop. So this story on our podcast, on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org said anti-American left-wing violence continues to increase. And because why? There was a shooting at an ICE facility this week. Okay? A gunman opens fire at ICE Dallas office in politically motivated attack, killing one, FBI director says. A gunman who had engraved the shell casings with the phrase anti-ICE opened fire Wednesday morning at Dallas ICE facility in what FBI director called a politically motivated attack. This morning, just before 7 a.m. local time, an individual fired multiple rounds at a Dallas ICE facility, killing one, wounding several others while taking his own life, Patel wrote on X. While the investigation is ongoing, an initial review of the evidence shows an ideological motive behind his attack because he wrote it on his shell casings, and now there's all kinds more. One of the unspent shell casings recovered was engraved with the phrase anti-ICE. The Democrats, in this article, there's an amused post from X that says, the Democrats and their willing accomplices in the drive-by media have given permission to their most unhinged constituents to kill ICE agents. The far-left Dallas ICE shooter's notes explained he was attempting to convince ICE agents to quit with this act. With his shooting, he was trying to intimidate ICE agents. And there's a post here that says, one of the handwritten notes recovered read, hopefully this will give ICE agents real terror to think, is there a sniper with AP rounds on that roof? Right? These are war tactics. This isn't just someone who got upset and goes and murder someone. This is pre-planned. And the evidence is now showing it was months in the planning. Okay? The bullet ended up hitting 3 detainees, 3 people that ICE had arrested who were illegal aliens. He killed one of them and injured 2 of them. Didn't hit any ICE agents. They don't care. They're trying to sow chaos. And here's the kicker. The guy used an app, a phone app, that allows the left to track ICE agents' whereabouts. Remember during the LA riots, they announced this, and CNN, who should be shut down for this, promoted the app on air. CNN is promoting an app that you can track ICE agents so you can attack them. If that's not sedition, what is that? Now, again, I want to get you guys all thinking about something that's been bugging me, because they're talking about anti-ICE and ICE agents is the term. But these aren't just ICE agents. These are representatives of the United States government. This is law enforcement. See, people kind of like try to separate them like, well, these are illegitimate. These are Gestapo. They're just rounding up people in the streets and hauling them off like the SS. Bullcrap. Every person they're grabbing has a record. They're illegal. They're looking for them. They're trying to separate them, and you got to quit saying, no, this isn't about you're attacking ICE. You're attacking me, my freedom, my liberty, and our government. This is a violent overthrow. Every attack on ICE, okay, is an attack on you and our country. And we got to start talking that way. But here's the bottom line. What is the left doing? They are attacking us, you and I, and our representatives in the government in defense of what? Illegal immigration. These aren't you American citizens they're rounding up. These are illegal aliens that the left brought in under the corrupt Biden regime to do what? To be their army to overthrow the U.S. government if they couldn't do it by cheating in elections. Get it? They're protesting the fact that we figured out what their plan was to overthrow the government and we're trying to stop them. That's what they're doing. And you just have to be ready for that. And so, and then they're trying to gaslight you with, It's right-wing violence. 74% of political violence is from the right. And it's all been debunked. Even the woke left-wing publication, The Atlantic, okay? The Atlantic came out and said, the Atlantic admits left-wing terrorism is on the rise. Something profound has shifted in the political culture and the media because the Atlantic just admitted what many of us have known for a long time. Left-wing violence is on the rise. It's a shocking admission from them, a media that, according to CNN's Donnie O'Sullivan, can't find any examples. There's no examples of left-wing violence. Even these guys that shot at the ICE facility, oh no, he's a right-wing guy. They're lying. They're gaslighting you, but fortunately, we've diminished their reach so badly that they aren't being affected. Here's what the Atlantic said. We found that left-wing terrorism has increased since President Donald Trump's rise to political prominence in 2016. Indeed, in 2025 marks the first time in more than 30 years that left-wing attacks outnumber those from the far right. Okay? Well, that's bull. Because what we've discovered is that all these studies that say, oh, it's right-wing violence are so skewed that they're screwed. They're BS. They totally exaggerate any left-wing, any right-wing violence, and they just completely shrink down anything from the left. Don't believe them. They're lying. You can believe your own eyes and ears. You can believe what's on this podcast because we won't lie to you. So Robbie Starbuck, posted this on X. He said, in little over a week, leftists have murdered Charlie Kirk, shot an ABC affiliate for not hiring Kimmel. We're going to talk about that. Shot a wedding yelling Free Palestine, shot people at an ICE facility, and had mass celebrations and celebrated Charlie Kirk's murder in the streets of New York. That is the definition of domestic terrorism. That's the record. That's the truth. Okay? So the FBI arrested the suspect in the shooting at the Sacramento ABC station who was freed on bail. Now get this. This guy shoots guns at the ABC radio, or ABC television affiliate in Sacramento, and they let him free on bail. A man suspected of opening fire on Sacramento news station officers on September 19th faced multiple state and federal gun-related charges in what authorities described as a targeted shooting. No kidding. He was shooting ABC for taking Kimmel off the air. And Annabelle Hernandez Santana, 64 of Sacramento, was arrested by police that evening, but posted bail and was released the next day. They released the guy the next day. Just hours later, the FBI arrested him. Director Catherine announced on X, he is again being held in Sacramento County Jail, but now is ineligible for bail. A search of Hernandez Santana's personal property revealed anti-Trump administration writing, an apparent reference to assassination conservative Charlie Kirk, and a calendar note to do the next scary thing, according to federal officials. This is pre-planned. This is one of their indoctrinated and totally mentally ill, trunch derangement syndrome. The people who listen to the propaganda on CNN, who say, oh, get the app and track these items and show up for them, okay? And listen to me. You got, it was either the governor candidate in Virginia or New Jersey who's, had a video or an audio of them at a closed-door event where she was saying, let your rage drive you. Your rage, not your brain, not your heart, your anger. Well, what do you think you're going to get when you tell people that? They want violence. And we're going to get violence. But President Trump is going to answer, okay? But this is what you get if you don't answer. Charlie Kirk tribute scrapped by Sinclair after local TV giant got threats against its ABC stations. Well, the first threat was the guy shot up the station. But it got worse. Sinclair had plans to air a tribute to Charlie Kirk last week in place of Jimmy Kimmel on their ABC stations, which had already been suspended by parent company ABC, but had to nix those plans last minute and move the tribute to YouTube because of violent threats against ABC affiliate stations. Sinclair Broadcasting abruptly canceled plans to air a Charlie Kirk tribute, after ABC affiliates across the country received multiple violent threats, forcing the firm to move the program to YouTube. The Baltimore-based local TV giant, which owns more than 40 ABC affiliates, yanked the Kirk tribute late Friday after it was alerted to local threats directed at specific local stations. In addition to scrapping Charlie Kirk tribute, Sinclair placed additional security measures on all its facilities, but they still canceled it. That's what the left wants. They want you to stop. They want you to shut up. There was a ABC or there was a CNN guy who basically went on and said, well, you know, what do you expect? If you keep rounding up illegals, then people are going to push back. And so basically what they're saying is the violence is going to continue until you quit, until you and I, till Donald Trump, to our whole movement, to America, kneels in front of them and gives them what they want. The answer to that is not no, it's hell no, okay? And you're not going to make us kneel, we're going to make you kneel, okay? But that's what they're about. This guy at CNN literally said, you want us to stop? Give us what we want. Do what we say, right? Chuck Schumer and Kim Jeffries are saying, we want you to give us $1 trillion so we can give free health care to these illegal immigrants that we brought in, and we want you to stop deporting them, or we won't pass the budget. We'll talk about that later. Are you for that? Is that good for America? Hell no. Hell no. So this was good news right away on Monday. FBI moves to investigate questions about Kirk assassination, because there are a lot of questions. And what Steve Bannon said right away is what they do to us in government is they say, oh, the guy that killed Charlie Kirk was acting on his own, and even his roommate, don't investigate him. Don't go beyond that. Just give him the death penalty, and they won't even do that. They'll give him life in prison, and then it's over. But that's not the point. It's not over. There's much more going on here. Again, with all these people, that they're on social media. There's people who had pre-knowledge of what's going on. So Kash Patel released this, and I was really glad to see this. And I think you were too. FBI Director Kash Patel on Sunday said that the Law Enforcement Bureau is meticulously investigating theories and questions into the assassination of conservative activist and Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. The investigation will touch on the location in which the shot was taken, the possibility of accomplices, the text message confession and related conversations, Discord chats, the angle of the shot and the bullet impact, how the weapon was transported, hand gestures observed as potential signals near Charlie at the time of his assassination, and visitors to the alleged shooter's residence in the hours and days leading up to the shooting, Patel wrote on X. That is what you and I are looking for. There's all kinds of videos out there on YouTube. You know, we're on the right. We're so traumatized by the gaslighting by our own government. Whether it was COVID, January 6th, it doesn't matter. They lied to us. So what do? We don't believe anything. And we're looking at every detail because we want the damn truth, and we never get the truth. But now, Kash has got the message, right? And he's looking at things. They basically got the list of all the questions I've seen on the internet, and they're going to do something about it. I'm all for that. That's good news. We need that. We need the truth. And so this became, after that statement, Trump signed an executive order that basically says Antifa is a domestic terrorist group. And they are. They're not only domestic, they're an international terrorist group. So Trump directs feds to tackle far-left domestic extremism and their funders. President Donald Trump on Thursday announced he's signing an executive order directing federal law enforcement and counterterrorism agencies to coordinate against rising threats posed by domestic political extremism. Let's see here. Trump said the directive aims to dismantle the funding and recruiting apparatus. Because again, they're recruiting online. They're raising money online. They're funneling us through these groups that have been like the Ford Foundation and Open Society, which have been well known. It aims to dismantle the funding and recruiting apparatus behind anarchist and far-left groups like Antifa, which have fueled a deadly escalation in political violence over recent months. These are professional agitators. These are bad people, said Trump, and they're paid a lot of money by rich people. I saw a post earlier this week where one guy was making $75,000 a year by being a professional Antifa member. This is a paid militia. This is an army. For what reason? Not to defend democracy, to violently overthrow the U.S. government. Let's see. He said they are paid a lot of money by rich people, some of whom we know. President Trump said after signing the order, adding, Soros is a name that I hear. Maybe I hear about a guy named Reid Hoffman. Yeah, Reid Hoffman. White House Secretary, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller hailed the move as bringing the entire force of the federal government to uproot these organizations, root and branch, and that's what must happen. While Federal Bureau of Investigation Director Kash Patel emphasized federal law enforcement will follow the money. So here's a short clip by Stephen Miller that I'm loving and you're loving and you got to support.
Very historic and significant day. This is the first time in American history that there is an all-of-government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism, to dismantle Antifa, to dismantle the organizations that have been carrying out these acts of political violence and terrorism. What we have seen, if you look at whether it be going back to the riots that started with Black Lives Matter and all the way through to the Antifa riots, the attacks on ICE officers, the doxing campaigns, and now the political assassinations, these are not lone, isolated events. This is part of an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. It is structured, it is sophisticated, it is well-funded, it is well-planned. There is really no parallel like this to anything else in the country right now. There is an entire system of feeder organizations that provide money, resources, weapons, and when they're attacking ICE officers, they're attacking federal buildings, or they're isolating public officials for harassment, doxing, intimidation, and ultimately attempted assassination. It is all carefully planned, executed, and thought through. It is terrorism on our soil. Because of this executive order, Kash and Pam are going to have the tools they need, working with Scott, to take these organizations apart piece by piece. And the central hub of that effort is going to be the Joint Terrorism Task Force, or JTTF, which sits inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But for those at home who are worried about terrorism in this country, they need to understand, because of President Trump's strength, because of his vision, because of his leadership, we are now going to use the entire force of the federal government to uproot these organizations root and branch. And again, that's only possible because of President Trump and his leadership.
Okay, now, that's awesome, because for your and my entire lives, people in our government who are communists, go back, to the McCarthy hearings. Yeah, McCarthy was right, by the way, and he only got 30% of them. They've been in our government forever. They have not only allowed this communist movement in our nation, they have helped it. All the money from, USAID that was being billions of dollars were funding Antifa, Black Lives Matter, every damn left group you want here and abroad. Okay, Antifa is an international organization. Ask Hungary, ask Czechoslovakia, ask those countries. And George Soros is funding this. But they're going to gaslight you and say, oh, it's just an idea. I mean it. They're doing it. Don't buy it. This is organized, and Stephen Miller just laid it out. And we're gonna go after them. But I want to take a minute to make you understand, help you understand, not make you, help you understand how difficult this is going to be, because there's no such thing in law of a domestic terrorist organization. There's no law behind it. So let me take a minute, because Politico had an article that is interesting. Trump's Antifa order thrills allies and tests the law. There is no legal mechanism for President Donald Trump to designate Antifa as a domestic terrorism organization. An executive order attempting to do so has only spurred questions about how the Trump administration will implement its left-wing crackdown. But for Trump allies and aides who have long awaited this step, that's not the point. People close to the president view the executive order issued Monday as a long overdue action. That's what I view it as. One that serves as both a messaging and prioritization tool for the White House and sends a signal that Trump will devote resources to investigating the broad anti-fascist ideology. This is important because there's been words before, but no action. The EO is action, and then Miller and Patel and Bonnie and those guys are tripling down, okay? There's not really a formal designation in law, but as the executive, he can do that, and he can direct a skewing of DOJ resources to attack the problem, said Ken Cuccinelli, who served as Trump's Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security during the first Trump administration. I wish we had done it in 2020 when these people were rather clearly going from city to city. And Cuccinelli said, and I asked for it and didn't get it. That's the difference between Trump 2.0 and Trump 1.0. It was clear then. This organization, called for it, right? We ran a full-page ad after the 2020 election was stolen, asking Trump to declare temporary partial martial law. But they didn't. But now they are. That's big. Because of this, the administration will face significant difficulties as Trump threatens investigatory and prosecutorial action against those who financially support Antifa. The federal government does have a list of foreign terrorist organizations, and the Justice Department has the power to prosecute those who give material support to those organizations. But no such mechanism exists for designated domestic terrorist organizations. It's in part due to sweeping First Amendment protections for organizations operating on U.S. soil. The law does not have a parallel statute for designating anybody as a domestic terrorist. So that's a problem. Building successful cases connecting people and organizations to Antifa will be difficult, and any actions the administration takes to charge people under domestic terrorism framework will likely face a robust legal challenge. Again, robust legal challenge. They're going to challenge everything. The process is the penalty. When you seize their bank accounts, when you get court orders to investigate everything about them, they're going to be crippled. And they're going to find evidence. And I think eventually there will be a RICO case in this. Now, I talked to some people yesterday and this week saying, I really think the problem we've got is that there is so much on the plate for the DOJ and the FBI that they need help. And I think that help needs to be a special counsel. I think we've got to create these other entities and fund them that can marshal legal resources and just go crazy on these people. So I don't know if that's coming, but it's going to be things like that that are going to be important to the success of this, because you can only do so much. So let me give you an example. Trump DOJ set to begin criminal investigations into Soros-linked groups. Now, Trump had said that he wants this done, and now they're acting. The U.S. Department of Justice is signing more than half a dozen U.S. attorneys to begin laying the groundwork for investigations into foreign left nonprofits and political groups funded by billionaire Democrat donor George Soros, including the Open Society Foundation. A directive issued to the U.S. Attorney's Office by senior DOJ officials instructs investigators to identify specific individuals and groups who may have violated the law for further investigation, with possible charges including racketeering, arson, wire fraud, material support for terrorism. Okay? That's out there. Notably, the move follows a series of posts on Truth Social written by Trump, pressing Attorney General Pam Bondi to begin investigations into a number of current and former state and federal officials responsible for the Russia hoax, etc. Okay? So what I'm saying is they're taking resources, and remember, we fired a whole bunch of leftist lawyers, and a lot of them quit in the DOJ. So where are we getting these people that we need to do these investigations? That's a real challenge. And so I'm concerned about, you can have the intent, but do you have the allocation of resources? That's a big question. And so it mentioned, we want, Pam Bondi, Trump put out a post that I didn't like, basically publicly saying, hey, Pam Bondi, when are you going to start arresting people? Now, you and I have been saying that, and we want to see that, and we're disappointed in that. But I really didn't appreciate Trump calling out Pam Bondi in public when he could do it privately. So all he has to do is pick up the phone and say, Pam, when are we going to go after these people? So I think that post was for you and I, but then he took it down. And it's causing some problems. And I had some debates with some people about that. But what was the result? Jim Comey indicted on obstruction and perjury charges. This was great. This is something that we needed to see. This is something that we wanted to see. Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted Thursday by a federal grand jury in Virginia on charges he made false statements to Congress when he denied leaking to the media, putting himself in legal jeopardy after doubling down on his 2017 denials during Senate testimony in 2020. Now that's key because the statute of limitations on that perjury charge was going to run out next week. So they had to act. Comey alleged leaking was already part of the FBI's prior Tropic Vortex classified leaks inquiry and was reviewed by then U.S. Attorney John Durham. However, he never faced criminal charges over his alleged leaks until the grand jury charged him with lying to Congress and obstruction of congressional proceedings this week. The DOJ's new indictment, approved by federal grand jury, stems from allegations that Comey misled the Senate during the testimony in late September 2020 when he doubled down on his May 17th denial that he had never authorized leaks of information to the media about the Trump-Russia investigation or Clinton-related investigations. Basically, that's just not true because there's testimony by his staff that said he authorized the leaks. And the professor who he leaked it to has now said that Comey gave him the information. So it's pretty clear that he leaked. And so Roger Stone posted this on X, and it really, to me, was important because I just said to you that the process is the punishment. Because what are the chances we're going to get a conviction out of an Arlington, Virginia jury who are all government workers and all Democrats who hate Trump, okay, and love that Comey lied and broke the law to go after Trump. They love that. What are the chances we're going to get a conviction? And, oh yeah, a judge was appointed who Biden put in the office. It's a Biden appointed judge. Okay, so the process has to be the penalty, all right? Roger Stone said, wait, why isn't Comey being gagged by the federal judge in this case like I was? They arrested Roger Stone, and then they immediately said, you can't speak in public to defend yourself. Jim Comey gets to go on YouTube and post a bullcrap video, okay? Roger Stone says, in fact, why is he being allowed to turn himself in? He turned himself in on Friday with his lawyers, walked in. Why isn't he subject to a 6 a.m. raid on his home by 29 heavily armed FBI agents? And why isn't CNN outside the door while he did it? I want to know the answer to that. I said, we agree with Roger Stone. You can follow me at X and Tom Z WTPC. Tom Z WTPC, We the People Convention. Tom Z WTPC on X and on Getter and on every other thing. We agree with Roger Stone. If Comey leaked classified documents, which he did, why is the FBI not searching his home and office right now to see if he still has any? Well, people said to me, well, Tom, come on, Comey's smart. He probably got rid of all that stuff. I don't care. I want them to take every document out of his house. I want them to take his phone. I want them to take his computer. I want them to search everything. Who the hell knows what's there? That's what they did to Roger Stone. That's what they did to Donald Trump, the former president. Why didn't they do that? Cash? Why didn't we do that? Why aren't they not searching the home of the Columbia professor who's the co-conspirator? What documents does he have? Why aren't they searching the home of the New York Times reporters that the professor told them he gave the documents to? If those media people have classified documents in their possession, that's a crime. We've got to get tougher We need to crush them. We need to do what they tried to do to you and I, right? Why did they put all the January 6ers in prison? So Tom Zawistowski would shut the hell up. So you would shut the hell up. That's why they did it. So Steve Bannon would shut up. So Charlie Kirk would shut up. We're going to arrest you on bogus charges if you don't shut up. We didn't. These aren't bogus charges. This is the difference. The left is trying to tell you, and all you see is Trump's hit list. Trump is targeting his opponents. This is, political retribution. Of course they're saying that. Because guess what? They already did this and more to us. But this isn't retribution, folks, because these aren't bogus charges. These are real charges. Minutes after the indictment, FBI Director Kash Patel argued on social media that for far too long, previous corrupt leadership and their enablers weaponized federal law enforcement, damaging once proud institution and severely eroding public trust, and that nowhere has this politicization of law enforcement been more blatantly than during the Russiagate hoax, a disgraceful chapter in history we continue to investigate and expose. All right? Well, Cash, it's got to be tougher. The process has to be the punishment. But here's the point. I do think we have a chance of conviction. And if you go to our website for this story, you'll see Jonathan Turley has a video that he did an interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News. And he said, you know what? This indictment is very interesting. It's insanely narrow. It's basically comes down to, did he leak classified documents? And did he lie about it to Congress? Well, McCabe testified that Comey told him that he released classified documents. And we're going to talk about him later in the podcast. But there's people who are going to testify against Comey. And it's black and white. So how can you be in a jury and say, well, these people say he did give this. They subpoenaed the professor, so maybe they didn't raid his home because he's going to help with the prosecution. But the professor says, yeah, he gave me the documents and told me to give them to the New York Times. And then the other people testify and say, well, he's not allowed to take these documents. That was a crime. We might get a conviction. But also, there's going to be more and more charges against Comey. This is the beginning. The Russia stuff, the 2020 election, all the stuff they did to Flynn and things, there's going to be more and more charges, okay? But this is the predicate. We're excited. It's a good step, but keep it in perspective. But don't let them tell you this is Donald Trump going after political opponents. This is Donald Trump. He didn't tell Pam Bondi, go get these people who targeted me. He said, go get the people who broke the law. There's a big difference. You need to speak those words to the people in your circle who are buying the BS that this is all political retribution. This is a fight to save our nation because Jim Comey and Hillary Clinton and all these people are part of the insurrection to violently overthrow the U.S. government, okay? Jim Comey basically destroyed Donald Trump's first presidential term, and then they stole the election. He's part of that. He's part of the coup. Act like it. Treat it like it, okay? And so then you see that it's still ongoing. It's still ongoing. It's still being exposed, and that's what's been great about all these things that are coming out. We talked to you last week about the document that was found that said, oh, the FBI and the DOJ had a list of 92 conservative organizations that they were targeting, not because we committed a crime, because they were political enemies and they were stopping the overthrow of the U.S. government. Turning Point USA, We the People Convention. Remember that story last week? Okay, so what comes out this week? It just keeps coming like a drumbeat. Fail. The left's supposed bribery scandal about Tom Homan has already flamed out. What's this story about? Oh, this story is about liberal media and leftists on social media have been pushing a bribery scandal about Tom Homan for the last few days, and the story has already flamed out. Lots of people knew this was nothing more than another hit piece on a Trump ally and completely dismissed it. Megyn Kelly's response was particularly epic. Okay, the problem for the left is that it's so old, people can see a manufactured hit job like this coming a mile away. Basically, they said that while Biden was in charge, they tried to entrap Tom Homan like they did Mike Flynn, and they dressed up FBI agents and pretended to be business people to try to get Tom Homan to take a $50,000 bribe. He didn't take it, but now they want to smear him with it. And so basically, in a statement provided to MSNBC, FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said, this matter originated under the previous administration and was subjected to a full review by FBI agents and Justice Department prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. And Tom Homan basically said this was garbage. This was nonsense. This was a setup. That's the difference, folks. Again, I'm trying to connect the dots for you. They were weaponizing government to illegally go after conservatives. We are not weaponizing government to illegally go after the left. We are legally going after them with real charges for real crimes. That's day and night, folks. That's day and night. So don't buy the lies. Don't buy the lies. And so this comes out, and none of you are surprised by this, I guarantee you. FBI report shows 274 agents were on Capitol grounds on January 6th. It's got to fix something here. 1 second. Okay. Wow. Are you shocked, right? Are you surprised? Yeah. 274 agents. These are plainclothes, undercover people in the crowd on January 6th, when they wouldn't admit this at all. This is a document that the FBI found and finally released. The FBI secretly deployed more than 250 plainclothes agents to the U.S. Capitol during the January 6, 2021 riot, an operation so disorganized it unleashed searing frustration among many of the FBI's rank and file that the Bureau has lost its core competency to wokeness and allowed its employees to become pawns in a political war, according to an after-action report kept from the public for more than 4 years, and more importantly, kept from Congress. Okay? Congress asked for this information, and Christopher Wray would not give it. Why? Because it was damning. It was a Fedsurrection. We will prove this, folks. We're going to prove this. This is part of it. Scores of FBI agents and personnel, many from the Bureau's premier Washington field offices, sent anonymous complaints to the after-action team detailing how agents were sent into an unsafe scenario without proper safety equipment or the ability to identify themselves readily as armed officers to other police agencies, according to a report obtained by Just the News. The most persistent complaint was that the Bureau during the James Comey and Christopher Wray era had become infected with political biases and liberal ideology that threatened the protesters from the summer 2020 Black Lives Matter riots far differently than those arrested on January 6th. So they treated Black Lives Matter like, oh, don't arrest. They have a right to burn your business down because George Floyd, who was a drug addict who didn't get murdered by a policeman, but died of a fentanyl overdose, okay? They could burn down your business and beat people up and kill people, but we're not going to arrest them. But you January 6ers, oh yeah, you tried to overthrow the U.S. government by protesting. And when we opened the door and invited you in, and when we urged you to go into the Capitol, yeah, nothing to see here except their own agents saw it and they reported it. The FBI should make clear to its personnel and the public that despite its obvious political bias, it ultimately still takes its mission and priorities seriously, one employee wrote in a stinging review. It should equally and aggressively investigate criminal activity regardless of the offender's perceived race, political affiliations, or motivations. But they didn't do that, did they? They didn't do that, and it was intentional. And so I thought this meme was particularly good. January 6th will be remembered as the day the government set up a staged riot to cover up the fact that they certified a fraudulent election, right? That's what that's about. One agent suggested in this report the problem extended beyond the Bureau to the DC's U.S. Attorney's Office, indicating a more widespread problem with political bias. the U.S. Attorney's Office is dictating that what it gets. The U.S. Attorney's Office is dictating what gets to be investigated. This is a dangerous precedent because we can barely get them to prosecute investigations that clearly meet thresholds needed for federal prosecutions, the agent wrote. However, their willingness to conduct a search warrant on someone's life for a misdemeanor seems ridiculous. It's unreasonable for the FBI to conduct investigations involving misdemeanor violations at the federal level. It's not our role. The existence of mass FBI agents at the Capitol on January 6th could also be a problem in many cases that were subsequently brought in court. This is an important point about this. If the agents were witnesses at the Capitol and did not disclose it in subsequent affidavits during prosecutions, it could create grounds for defendants to appeal. The document also reveals for the first time there were widespread concern for years inside the Bureau, sentiments that boiled over after the FBI began sending SWAT teams to arrest January 6th participants on misdemeanor charges that the FBI had become biased in favor of liberals and against conservatives. So John Solomon, who broke this story, was on Steve Bannon's, and he said there's this law called the Giglio Law or something, that if an FBI agent testified against a January 6th defendant and didn't disclose that they were in the crowd undercover, that can throw the whole conviction out. So this is going to have real ramifications. And I've said to people, these agents, if they did that, should be charged. They should be charged. And so this is just the beginning. We're going to prove that this was a Fed insurrection. The evidence is there. They've just been hiding it, just like this document. But this was a great thing for all of us. And I got a note from Jake Lang. Many of you who've watched this podcast for a long time know that Jake Lang was the January 6th prisoner that we were very close to and that we helped raise money with and all that. And he was ecstatic. And on this story at WeThePeopleConvention.org, on our story, I put his X post where he said he is just so happy to see this report come out. And he's so happy to see James Comey charged, because he was charged with the same charge they charged many of the January 6th January 6th political prisoners. And that was obstruction of Congress. The irony is rich, but there's going to be more than irony. There's going to be a price to pay, and we need to do that. Okay? So all that's happening on the legal front. I know it's a lot to follow. I hope I put it in perspective for you guys. But let me just close with this. We're in a real war. People are going to die. More people are going to die. Be ready. They're going to escalate and escalate. They're not going to de-escalate. They're going to escalate. There is going to be manufactured riots in major U.S. cities, and Trump and the military are going to have to crush them. Be ready for that. It's coming. This isn't de-escalating. It's escalating. I've said to someone this week, we got two big things we got to do. We've got to deport 12 million. Well, now it's down to 10 million because we've already deported 2 million. We've got to deport 10 million more illegal aliens, but we're going to probably have to arrest 100,000 or more of these activists, of these indoctrinated people who they're not going to give in. You're not going to reason with them. You're not going to, they think killing Charlie Kirk was good and justified and right. You know why? Because we're fascists, because capitalism sucks, because we're defending democracy, whatever that means. They don't even know what they're talking about. But they're willing to kill you, and you're going to have to defend yourself. And we as a nation are going to have to defend ourselves. So understand, the worst is yet to come. But the fact that our government and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance and Cash and Pam and Hegseth and everybody are focused on the problem is the good news. Because this is real as rain and it ain't going away. They're not going to quit. They've got to be defeated. Locking up Comey is part of that. It was a good week in bad times. It's the best I can tell you. Okay? So I told you before that there's going to be a government shutdown. The Democrats want the shutdown. That is the left's plan, okay? Because they want to create victims. They want to stoke the riots, right? So White House tells agencies to prepare for firings if government shuts down. Trump's move against them is to make it really hard because they're going to get all the Republican votes in the Senate. Now, remember, the House has already passed a continuing resolution to November 21st, which is still bullcrap. They should be passing appropriations. They're totally feckless, okay? But that's a whole other story. But the bill has already passed the House. It's in the Senate. They're coming back Monday because the government shuts down on Wednesday if they don't pass this. 53 Republicans are going to vote for it. They need 7 Democrats to get to 60. Well, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem, Jeffries are saying they're saying in closed doors we want to shut down. You know why? Because the left told them that. Because when Schumer didn't shut down the government last time in the spring and the big beautiful bill passed, they went nuts on him. And now he's going to do their will because he's afraid of them. And these guys are saying, listen to me. They're saying to Jeffries and to Schumer, we want blood. Literally, they're saying, we want you to fight to the end. The White House is telling federal agencies to prepare large-scale firings of workers if the government shuts down next week in a partisan fight over spending plans. In a memo released on Wednesday night, the Office of Management and Budget said agencies should consider a reduction in force for federal programs whose funding would lapse next week is not otherwise funded and is not consistent with the president's priorities. That would be a much more aggressive step than in previous shutdowns when federal workers not deemed essential were furloughed but returned to their jobs and got paid fully for not working, okay? Trump is saying, we're going to fire you. A mass firing would eliminate employee positions, which would trigger yet another massive upheaval in federal workforce that has already faced major rounds of cuts this year. When asked by reporters in the Oval Office on Thursday afternoon about the possibility of government shutdown, Trump said, could be, yeah, because the Democrats are crazed. They don't know what they're doing. Oh, no, they do know what they're doing. They're trying to destroy the United States. And this shutdown is just part of that. And Trump is setting them up, all right? Because you got like this person who's running for governor who's in the Senate in Virginia who's got all her employees, are government employees in her district. And if she votes to shut down the government, how's she going to win the governor's race? Trump's got him in a box. Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries said, we demand a meeting with Trump. You know what Trump said? Go pound salt. Because you don't want a meeting with me to discuss reasonable things. You want to force me. You want to say, I want $1 trillion for illegal immigrants to get free Medicare. I want you to stop deporting them, okay? And I want you to increase spending when we're already drowning in debt. This is planned. I said to you, we want this. We want to shut down the government. Shut it down for the rest of Trump's term in office. Because then we can go to town. We can pick who gets money, who doesn't. Okay? But do not doubt that what they're trying to do, Hakeem Jeffries, it was in Axios. I read it this morning. They're saying their battle plan is, we want you to recruit people who will go on the news and tell stories about how the Medicaid cuts are crushing them. And we want sob stories. But they don't have the media to deliver it. And if you just counter it and say, this is all fake, they can't win. We're going to win this. How? By being firm. And Trump is firm. That's the key. So here's a proof that Trump is winning and the Dems are losing. Let's watch this video. It's clear as a bell.
What do you think?
Yeah, what are we seeing? Donald Trump being underwater, Democrats saying, oh, this guarantees us we're going to fly high in the midterms. Let me tell you, this guarantees you nothing, because at this particular point, the Democrats are the New Orleans Saints of political parties. What are we talking about? Trust the Dems or GOP more on the economy? Who leads on the economy? Republicans by 7. Immigration, Republicans by 13. How about crime? A big issue for Donald Trump and the Republicans. Look at that. Lead by 22 points. So the bottom line is this. At this particular point, the ball may be on the ground, but the Democrats have not picked up the ball and running with it. If anything, at this particular point, it's the Republicans who are running with the ball on the top, as issues, the economy, immigration, and crime.
Give some context on this. Compare this when Republicans last took the House.
Yeah, let's compare it back to 2022. I think this kind of gives away the game right here. Okay, the GOP is more trusted than the Dems on the economy. It was 12 points in 2022. Slight decline in that lead, but still 7 points. How about immigration? It was Republicans by 3 back in 2022. Look at this. The Republican lead's actually gone up by 10 points. What are you doing, Democrats? My goodness gracious. And on crime, the Republicans were up by 13, and now they're up by 22. The lead, again, expanding by nearly double digits. So whatever Democrats are doing, it ain't working, Kate. It ain't working. Republicans have the lead on all three issues.
What's the reason that you are finding so far that's driving this?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all about the center of the electorate, right? You win with independents, you win overall. And what do we see right here among independents? Republicans still have a point lead on the economy. They got a 10-point lead on immigration. They got a 21-point lead on crime. The bottom line is, when you look at these numbers, Democrats should call their offices, because at this particular point, even if Republicans, or even if the public doesn't like what Donald Trump is doing, they ain't necessarily liking what Democrats are doing. And it ain't just a referendum on one party. You actually have to go out and beat that party. At this particular point, Democrats are not able to beat Republicans. They still
and again, this isn't as Donald Trump came into office. These are numbers from this month.
These are numbers from September of 2025. We still find that the Republicans leading on all three of these issues. And of course, this economy will be the key. If Democrats are going to win, they're going to have to likely win on the economy. At this particular point among independents, you see that 1-point lead for Republicans. And overall, at least according to the Washington Post, they hold a 7-point lead on the economy overall as well.
Okay, so there you see that policy matters. But the left isn't offering any policies. Schumer and Jeffries, those guys, the Democrats, the people running for office on the Democratic side, they're not saying, well, this is how we should have closed the border. They don't have any plans for the economy. They just say, big government, spend. They just say, oh, if we get in, we'll take money from your neighbor and give it to you. That's communism. That's all they have. So why are they losing? And again, they keep telling you, they may not like Trump. Trump's doing just fine. Okay, he's above 50% in many polls, but it's the policy, stupid. And so this is how you understand. They don't have any policies, so they're going to just try to overthrow the government and then physically impress their tyranny on you. That's the plan. I know it sounds insane, but that's literally the plan. So if you can't steal it, blow it up. That's what they're trying to do. Okay? So I said you got to be strong. And unfortunately, we saw with the Kimmel thing that ABC caved. So while this says, Sinclair says it won't air Jimmy Kimmel's show for now, they decided last night, I'm recording this on Saturday morning, they did it on Friday night, that they're going to start airing the show. And then ABC put it back on, and they all were like, oh man, we won. Free speech, Jimmy Kimmel. Okay? Well, let's talk about that. Let's see. Basically, what the left did is they wanted to change the narrative. And a lot of us bought into it, and we had to fight it, that, Charlie Kirk wasn't a victim. Oh, no, he deserved it because he was a racist. He was a sexist, a homophobe. He was a horrible person. He brought it on himself. But Jimmy Kimmel, my gosh, he's our martyr. He's our martyr. Free speech. Oh, Donald Trump shut down Jimmy Kimmel. No, he didn't. ABC shut him down. And, the FCC, bullied ABC. Rent a Car made a comment, but they decided, why? Because they're losing millions. So what did they do? What did the left do? Well, they shot up the ABC TV stations. They attacked their own. Getting this? You think they're shooting up the ABC stations when they got Kimmel on? No, they love that. But take Kimmel off, they'll go after their own. All you people on the left don't understand. They always murder their own people once they get control. Okay? So Disney first says we're going to put Kimmel back on. Then Sinclair says, well, we're not going to air the Charlie Kirk thing. And now they say they're going to put Kimmel back on. because it's about free speech, don't you know? It's about free speech. Well, the irony of irony is this. On the very days that they're talking about the worst, I mean, there's literally clips of news people, by the way, who are saying, when Roseanne Barr got canceled, that was good. Right? When Tucker Carlson got fired, that wasn't an infringement on free speech. When the Biden people pushed for that, when Obama called up the CEO of the company and said, Roseanne Barr's got to go, and Michelle Obama did, that wasn't a violation of free speech. Oh, no. That was righteous. But Jimmy Kimmel, oh man, all of our free speech, this is tyranny. This is a dictatorship. The government's going to tell you what you can say. Horse hockey. You know that's not true. You need to call it out, and here's how you called it out. On our website, Google admits Biden administration forced them to censor conservatives on YouTube. So while they're trying to tell you and tell everyone you know that the free speech is being infringed on by Donald Trump and by you, and that we're the bullies and they're the victims, Jim Jordan gets this letter from Google that says, Google admits Biden White House pressured content removal, promises to restore banned YouTube accounts. After years of denying bias, Google now concedes that it gave in to pressure from the Biden White House to remove content that did not breach its own rules. In other words, this was content that met YouTube standards. They still took it down. The admission comes alongside a promise to restore access to YouTube accounts permanently removed for political speech related to COVID-19 and the 2020 election topics, where government officials had applied behind-the-scenes pressure to control the narrative. This move follows sustained scrutiny from the House Judiciary Committee, which reclaimed the net covered extensively, led by Chairman Jim Jordan of Ohio, who issued subpoenas and spearheaded an investigation that revealed the extent of the government influence on content moderation decisions at Google. In a letter from its legal representative, Google confirmed that it faced pressure from the federal government to suppress lawful speech. Google revealed that it had been contacted multiple times by top federal officials regarding content on its platform, even when that content did not break any rules. The company stated that senior Biden officials, including White House officials, conducted repeated and sustained outreach and pressed the companies regarding certain user-generated content related to the COVID-19 pandemic and did not violate its policies. Okay? In response to the period of politicized enforcement, the company said it would now take steps to reverse prior censorship decisions. Okay? Now, we respectfully decline your apology, Google. We decline your policy. And Jim Jordan was on a local radio station, and the host, my friend Bob France, questioned him and said, hey, but Jim, so what if they apologize? They broke their own rules, let alone the law. Why did they give in to the government? They didn't have to. Why didn't they fight it in court? They cost us, conservatives, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. When you talk about Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino, all these people that were on YouTube and had huge followings when COVID struck, all these doctors who were using YouTube to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Masks don't work. 6 feet doesn't work. This was found in the lab. This was not natural. This was, created, this virus. All those people they took off lost all their revenue. Google's a $3 trillion company. We demand restitution. And Bob brought that up to Jim Jordan, and he kind of gave this mealy mouth, well, this is one step, you can't do everything. And they're going to get to go back on. Except Alex Jones tried to go back on this week, and he posted one 12-minute video, and they threw it off like the next day and said, yeah, we said this in this letter, but we haven't implemented it yet. Well, here's the problem. Why would I go back on YouTube? We've been banned for years. Okay, now I'm back there now, but I don't have any faith in it because they didn't restore my former users. They're not going to bring back the people and say, okay, we're going to use the algorithm to start bringing you to Alex Jones's content again. What's the good of that? There is no good of that. And so I'm hoping we can do a class action lawsuit or something because they just admitted they did it. And we can show the damages. You should have heard the story that Clay and Buck told on their radio show. Oh my gosh, what they did to Outkick was unbelievable. Not only did they steal their money, they stole their money and then used their content to make money. You talk about criminal. So again, but here's the other point. We knew it was happening. We knew it was true. Now we're proving it. You need to share that story with people who don't understand that we've been right all along. Okay? So now I'm going to wrap up the first half of the podcast, okay, with this important piece that I need you to kind of consume. The Charlie Kirk effect is real. Thousands are coming to faith in Jesus. We all agree that God has a plan, and unfortunately, his plan was for Charlie Kirk to become a martyr. And as much as that hurt you and me personally, we had no choice to accept that plan. And we have seen an amazing thing happen. Amazing thing happen where people are going to church like never before. The evidence of, people are saying there were more people at Mass the weekend after Charlie Kirk's shooting and since then than there is at Christmas time. Much has been said and written about Charlie Kirk's approach to sharing the gospel via an open debate on college campuses. Whether you're a fan of Charlie Kirk or not, and regardless of your political views, the extraordinary events following his tragic death cannot be ignored. In the weeks since his shooting, something remarkable has been unfolding. Thousands upon thousands of young people are not only exploring Christianity, but actually turning up in churches, praying and professing faith in Jesus Christ. For those of us who sometimes wonder if the gospel still works in a post-Christian skeptical culture, this is your answer, okay? Churches are full. The rallies, they had a Kirk rally at the University of Minnesota, big crowd. Michael Knowles did a great job at that. Megyn Kelly and Youngkin were at Virginia Tech, huge crowd for the Turning Point thing. Then there was news, very interesting news that you got to pick up on. Very interesting news. After Charlie Kirk's death, the early voting in the Virginia governor's race has skyrocketed. There was a chart I saw that I should have grabbed so I could show you, but in several Virginia counties, the early voting for Sears, the Republican woman who's running, was at 82% of the Trump vote has already voted early. And another one was 77, and another one is 72. In the Democrat counties, the early voting is like 22, 33%. Winston Sears, who was out of it, I think is going to win Virginia. That's huge. In New Jersey, the Republican is going to win, I think. The Democrat contender is a disaster. There's been all kinds of stuff leaked about, she could not attend graduation at West Point because she violated the rules. There's all kinds of other documents leaking, and the Charlie Kirk effect. I think the Charlie Kirk effect is like Maha. Normal political consultants had no understanding of Maha, right? Make America Healthy Again. When I told you, when you listened to this podcast, I said, Maha is the key to Trump winning. Because I knew from our Tea Party days how many of our people and how many other people who weren't conservative believed in fighting the vaccines, believed in eating healthy, believed in getting the chemicals out of food. I think the Charlie Kirk effect, this spiritual renewal in America, is even bigger. And it's going to have a profound effect on next year's House and Senate elections and state elections and everything. But here's the most important point, and this is a direct ask. And I told you, if you're new to this program, this program is dedicated to protecting and defending our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Here's a direct ask. I will ask you in this show to do things. This is a direct ask. Because here's what most people don't even understand. Okay, here's what most people don't understand. Christians don't vote. So we're having this Christian revival, but they got to vote. And that's going to be the turning point. A reasonable ballpark is somewhere between 35 and 50% of self-identified Christians either are not registered to vote or choose not to vote. And it's like 30% aren't even registered. and then others choose not to vote. And there's various reasons for this, but that has to change. And quite frankly, the reason Donald Trump was ever elected president was because in Ohio, I and we and the life groups in Ohio convinced Christians in Ohio to vote for Trump, who wasn't exactly the model of Christianity in 2016. And that's why Trump won Ohio. But now it's got to go further. If there are, now get these numbers, okay? If there are roughly 62% of U.S. adults self-identify as Christians. That means roughly 170 million. Out of 270 million adults, 170 million say they're Christian. If Christians voted, Democrats could never win another election anywhere. Christians, you understand? All of you need to understand how powerful this is, okay? So if 44% of them aren't registered or don't vote, that's 75 million votes. That's how many votes Kamala Harris got. The number of Christians who don't vote is equal to all the lefty lunatics who voted for Kamala. Do you understand? It's no freaking contest. If Christians wake up and understand what Kirk was telling them, that the Bible requires you to fight Satan, to fight evil, to defend the church and the good and our children and life. And you do that by voting. You do that by voting. So what is your charge? What is your task to do? You, all of us, we need to talk to everyone we know who's a Christian and ask them if they're registered to vote. And if they're not registered to vote, you got to register them. Because if you want to save this country, that's the way you do it. Now, we're working on two things. Those of you who watch podcasts all the time know, one of our other biggest asks is that you're recruiting people for the skilled trades, because that's how we rebuild the middle class, and that's how we secure our nation's security, national security, okay? But now you understand the Charlie and Kirk effect is real, but showing up at church is great and important. But you got to register to vote. How about if at churches you start having voter registration forms? How about if you talk to your pastor and say, and share this segment with them and say, do you understand? If we just do what the Bible says and vote, we can change the whole world. How about taking voter registration forms to church and ask me, are you registered to vote? When they say no, say, fill this out. And if they fill it out, say, I'll take it to the Board of Elections myself for you to make sure they register. Don't just give them the form. Have them fill it out, and then you take it to the Board of Elections. This is the Charlie Kirk effect on steroids. This is how we protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? All right. This will be a segment on our podcast page that there'll be a link to, so you can share that part of this podcast, okay? In our chapters player. All right, so we're going to take a break, wrap up the first half of the podcast. Hope you get a better feel. We're at war. It's a real war. More people are going to die. There's going to be violence. We're going to have to use the military to take down the radical left. It's going to be horrifically ugly. But we're in control, and we're going to win if we just have the courage to act. And it sure looks like President Trump and his team have the courage to act. You've got to be prepared to act. You've got to be able to control the narrative. When things get ugly, you've got to explain why it's justified. Okay? All right. We're going to take a quick break. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. Something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. If you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this, whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot.
All right. Welcome back. Thank you for being with us for the second half of the podcast. I know that many of you, kind of watch it in segments. And again, we have the chapters player on our page, on our podcast page, where you can just go down the list and say, well, I know about that. I know about that. But, oh, what's this about? And just click on that and watch that video. Okay. So, you can get the information any way you want. We have the links on our podcast page, as it showed you, to every story. We're on X at TomZWTBC. We're on Facebook now. We're on Getter. We're on Gab. We're on MeWe. We're on TikTok again, though they banned us. We'll talk about that later. So you can follow us and share stories, and I post all the time. So try to help get the word out. That's what's important. And thank you to those who are donating. I had a good conversation with a new donor from California this week, and just said, hey, thanks for sending in, a check. We really appreciate it. What made you do that? And he basically said, because we really believe in what the We the People Convention does, that we are fighting and defending our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And so, I was glad to hear that. And we thank all of our donors. And if you can donate, we'd appreciate it, because we got some real fights on our hands coming, and it's going to take a lot of effort to control the narrative and get the message out. So thank you for everybody who donates. We really appreciate it. Okay. So those of you who watch the podcast know that in the second half, we usually start to cover
international events, and then do some more domestic stuff to wrap up the show. So the big story this week was that Trump went to the UN and basically read them the Riot Act. It was it's on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org. You can see the video. I think it's about an hour long of Trump just off teleprompter and just going crazy. President Donald Trump rips the UN at General Assembly for failing to broker ceasefire deals and peace agreements. Says climate change is a hoax, which was beautiful, and you are funding the Ukraine war against yourself, calling them out for basically buying Russian oil. More money, they're spending more money on Russian oil than they're sending to Ukraine to fight Russia. They're funding the war against themselves. It was brutal. It was classic Trump. And yes, you probably heard about the fact that they went and sabotaged Trump, literally. These crazy lefty jerks. And there's an investigation, and I hope they get fired, and there's some kind. But Donald Trump steps on the escalator, and the escalator stops. Someone intentionally stopped it. Then his teleprompter didn't work. Okay? It's all sabotage. This is how petty they are. But I'm just telling you, this is the left, and it's global, right? It's not just the United States. This is the left. So President Donald Trump criticized the UN in his speech on Tuesday, saying that the UN had not attempted to help him reach the ceasefire and peace deals he had brokered since returning to office. Near the top of his address at General Assembly, Trump touted all the major conflicts he had settled since returning to office, including conflicts between Pakistan and India, Cambodia and Thailand, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Republic of Rwanda, and others, okay? So he started with that. But then, Trump, got into Ukraine, and basically he's changed his position completely. Trump says Ukraine can win back all territory lost to Russia. He said, quote, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. Okay? What's going on here? Well, it's the art of the deal. Trump tried to do peace with Putin and he wouldn't listen. And Putin took advantage. So now Trump's playing hardball. He's telling Poland and NATO nations that if the Russian drones and stuff intrude or Russian planes intrude, shoot them down. He's telling Zelensky that he's going to give him, again, and Trump's being careful here, we're not giving any aid to Ukraine directly. We're letting NATO buy weapons from us and give them to Ukraine to use against Russia. Zelensky came out and basically said, we're going to start attacking inside Russia. He told the Russian parliament people that they better know where the fallout shelters are because they're going to need the bomb shelters. Okay? He's playing hardball. He said, after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it is causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all Ukraine back in its original form, meaning Crimea, which Putin took during Obama's pathetic, cave. All right? The president said that he was back with backing for Europe and NATO and enough time and patience. It's very much an option for Ukraine to drive Russian forces out and restore its borders. Why not? Trump wrote. Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years, a war that should have been taking a real military power less than a week to win. Ooh, okay. This is not disgusting. This is not distinguishing Russia. In fact, it's very much making them look like a paper tiger. Trump and Russia failed. Trump said Russia's faltering economy, shortages at home, and growing public discontent could tip the balance further in Ukraine's favor. He described Ukraine as having great spirit and growing stronger as the war drags on. Okay? He's just trying to make it clear to Putin that we're serious. And then he met with Erdogan, the head of Turkey, okay, who's a big Russian ally and buys their oil from Russia. And Erdogan wants parts for F-35 fighters because they actually make some of the components for the F-35s in Turkey. They're a NATO member, but they're aligned with Russia. And Trump met with him in the Oval Office and is talking about, we'll sell you the oil. You stop buying it from Russia and we'll see about those F-35s. Trump's about the deal, man, and he's serious. And then this came out, hope this is true, is a Gaza deal in the offing? President Trump seems to think so. President Trump addressed the media Friday morning outside the White House as he was leaving to go to the Ryder Cup in Long Island and said, while it's unclear what specifically he was asked that prompted his response, he said, "We're very close to a deal on Gaza. It looks like we have a deal on Gaza, and we'll let you know. I think it's a deal that will get the hostages back. It's going to be a deal that will end the war. It's going to be a deal. It's going to be peace. I think we have a deal. That'll be number 8 if we get that." When we talk about all the other peace deals, well, he also met with at the UN meeting, he met with all the Arab leaders. And they came out and said, "We had a great meeting." And Trump said he would not let Israel annex Gaza. And then there's the Arab leader, one of them came out and said, "Listen, the only person who can bring peace to the Middle East is Donald Trump." So now Trump's still working Ukraine. He's still working the Israel conflict. He's an amazing man. And when, and I believe it's when, not if, he brings these wars to an end, Nobel Peace Prize isn't enough. He's one of the greatest presidents in the history of our country. And he's a man of peace. And then he's going to have to fight the war, the insurrection here in the United States and bring peace. And he's going to have to fight internationally to bring peace. But he's a man of peace, not of war. Pretty impressive. Okay, I mentioned that we would talk about TikTok. Trump announces TikTok deal through executive order. Vance says business valued at $14 billion. So you're like, well, what's going on here? Because the TikTok thing just keeps getting kicked down the road, And then Trump had a call with Xi from China and said Xi agreed to something. President Trump on Thursday signed an executive order approving a proposal that would keep TikTok alive in the U.S. in a transaction that Vice President J.D. Vance valued the business at $14 billion. That seems really low because Musk paid $44 billion for Twitter. Okay, and it's not worth that, but it's worth more, $14 billion. Anyway, the deal satisfies the requirements of a national security law requiring China-based ByteDance to sell TikTok's U.S. operations or face an effective ban in the country. Under the terms, which China must still approve, a new joint venture company will oversee TikTok's business, with ByteDance retaining less than a 20% stake. Enterprise tech giant Oracle, Silver Lake, and Abu Dhabi-based MXG investment fund will be main investors in TikTok's U.S. business, controlling roughly a 45% stake in the entity, while ByteDance investors and new holders will own 35%. No representatives from ByteDance were present at the signing, and the company hasn't acknowledged that a transaction is taking place. So, what's really going on there? President Trump said Chinese President Xi Jinping gave the deal the go-ahead. Vance said the Chinese government put up some resistance before the agreement. Under the planned arrangement, Oracle will oversee the app's security operations and continue providing cloud computing services for a new TikTok U.S. firm. Let's see. Trump also said Oracle CEO Larry Ellison is involved in the ownership group and that his company is playing a very large part and basically making it legitimate. Now, I don't know if they can actually do this, but why is Trump fighting for this? Well, because I told you when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, he had like 30 million followers on TikTok. Turning Point USA reaches kids through TikTok. All right. Trump had huge footprint on TikTok. We got banned 2 weeks ago on TikTok at WTPC, Tom Z, WTPC, because we posted anti-China videos. Okay, so the question is, if this is American owned and Larry Ellison and those guys are dealing with their logarithms, am I going to be able to talk about China on it or not? Still not clear to me. Okay, but it's important because a lot of small U.S. businesses literally use TikTok as their main advertisement for customers. So Trump is fighting for this for those reasons. Okay, social media still is dangerous, but you need to understand why President Trump is doing this, okay? This was a really interesting story to me, okay? Feds take down massive swatting operation against conservatives. And I'm like, what the heck is this? Now, for those of you who don't know my history, Nan and I we own a telecommunications company, have been in business for 40 some years, okay? And, we know Telecom. I could never understand how you could swat someone, right? What's a swatting? For those who don't know, Someone makes a call to the local police and says, Tom Zalestowski's got a gun in his house and he's holding his wife hostage. And they send the SWAT team to my house thinking that I'm going to commit a crime. And it's bogus. It's a waste of resources, but it also hurts the person that's being swatted because now you got to, the police got to check it all out, blah, blah, blah. That's what swatting is, okay? Well, in my world, in telecom, you can't make a call that I can't trace, okay? Because it's this handoff. It goes from one piece of equipment to another with an identifier, and you can follow it. I could never understand how they could swat people and not be caught. This article helped me understand something I didn't know about my own industry. The U.S. Secret Service has uncovered a massive network of more than 100,000 SIM cards and 300 servers. SIM cards are those little cards that go in your phone and go into your camera. So they 100,000 of them in one location within a 35-mile radius of New York City. The operation, believed to be run by foreign nation-state threat actors and criminals, was uncovered during an investigation into a surge of swatting calls targeting high-ranking government officials, including members of Congress and the Trump administration. Targets of the swatting calls reportedly include Republican Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Senator Rick Scott from Florida, and Nikki Haley. The Secret Service Advanced Threat Interdiction Unit, in collaboration with various law enforcement agencies, traced the swatting signals to several locations in the New York tri-state area. Upon further investigation, they found a sophisticated network of SIM servers capable of generating enormous amounts of phone traffic while rapidly switching out SIM cards to avoid detection. Now, that's the key point of this. So what I understand is they have these 100,000 SIM cards, and they're using them to make IP phone calls. But as soon as the call is done, the card gets removed and you can't trace back to the IP because the SIM card is gone. Okay? That's what I understand. According to Matt McCool, the special agent in charge of Secret Service New York field offices, the network posed an imminent threat to the agency's protective operations. The servers, strategically positioned around New York City's cellular network infrastructure, could have overwhelmed cell towers and disrupted cell service for the entire city. Get this. Furthermore, the network was powerful enough to send an encrypted, anonymous text message to every person in the United States in 12 minutes. What? 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 Okay, so get this. While no arrests have been made in connection with the operation, early forensic analysis suggests that the networks have been utilized by cartels, human traffickers, and terrorists. It's an absolutely well-funded and well-organized, McCool stated, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. The Secret Service has successfully taken down the network, eliminating the imminent threat to New York City. However, he cautioned that it would be unwise to assume that there are no other similar networks operating across the country. What the hell? I mean, I just can't believe this can exist. You can't believe what I go through for our little tiny telecom company to be always being checked on by the government for every bloody thing you can imagine. Okay, I can't send a text message without some sort of a government document. This is how bad it's been. When Comey and Wray and these criminals, Garland, going back to Obama with Eric Holder, when they were spending all their time tracking down their political opponents, the people who hate America were just operating freely in this nation. And so I was glad to see this, but sure opened my eyes to, wow, this is bad. And, how do we stop it? Well, here's a story that's good that I didn't hear anywhere else, but I want to cover it with you because I think it's really important. Elon Musk's DOGE uncovered the biggest healthcare heist in American history. What the heck is this about? What if I told you that cartels and other bad actors from across the world conspired to undermine the integrity of the healthcare system in the U.S. and came way too close to succeeding? If you didn't hear about it, the bust of 324 people, the U.S.-based cartel shell medical supply companies, the pill mills pushing opioids, the doctors on the take, or how law enforcement captured many of the bad guys at the U.S. border and airports as they rushed to escape, that's understandable. the feds revealed this potential $14.6 billion Dept charge planted inside of Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance programs in June while most people were away on summer vacation. What is this about? Why did transnational organizations go after these particular programs? Criminals go where the money is, Acting Health and Human Services Inspector Juliet Hodgkins said at the news conference about the largest healthcare fraud takedown in American history. There's more than 1.4 trillion spent in these government programs every year, and the bad guys have tried by hook and by crook, and even with the aid of AI, to set in motion a plan to steal nearly $14.6 billion. They got away with just shy of $3 billion before they were caught, and their other frauds were frozen in their tracks. If you look, if you look at what the DOGE team did, okay. Using AI, the law enforcement tactics, the DOGE team worked with Homeland Security, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, and all hands on deck array of federal agents from the DEA, FBI, healthcare agencies to track down all the fraud leads, according to Dr. Mehmet Oz, head of the Center for Medical and Medicare Services. As a result, the feds are setting up a healthcare data fusion center to detect where fraud spikes are occurring in real time so they can be stopped. DOGE is involved, Oz told reporters. The president has been very clear that he wants this fraud, waste, and abuse crushed. That's the word he used. DOGE is not just about cutting waste and fraud with the government. It's been actively involved in helping us address places where fraud is existing and where they've never thought to look. Okay? And just so happened this week, there was a story that Musk made up with Trump at the Charlie Kirk memorial service on Sunday. And then this week, I see a story that says the U.S. government is going to be using XAI, Tesla XAI, for government operations. So there's more to Elon making up with Trump than just being friends. It's about money, okay? And I guess he's giving it to us because Trump would not do it otherwise at a very good deal. But that's a success story. But doesn't that scare you in that they're just finding this now? How much has been stolen in your lifetime? What percentage of our, $6 trillion budget is stolen? And they have no means of catching it until now. That should scare everyone because we can't afford our government now. And the fact is, we aren't getting the government we paid for. But that story tells you things can be done, and Trump's trying to do it. But boy, that's just scary. Okay, so then this was a big controversial, and I watched it. It was jaw-dropping. This press conference that happened this week. Health official warn of link between Tylenol and autism, and want you to know what you should know. I've never seen Donald Trump more passionate in my life. I mean, if you watch that press conference, he is so affected by autism. He just couldn't stop talking about it. And so what happened is Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy and other officials announced on September 22nd that acetaminophen, which Trump had trouble saying as well, an active ingredient, Tylenol, and other drugs, may be associated with autism, a disorder with a wide range of symptoms. They also said that folic acid, also known as a leucovorin, looks like a promising therapy for autism. So they said, we're gonna tell people, we're gonna put a bigger warning on Tylenol. And Trump is telling, if you're pregnant, don't take Tylenol, though there's not another thing, okay, to take. So that was a little risky. And then he was pushing not to give it to your kids until they're like 12. That was a little too premature, I thought. But he was so passionate. And you can tell why. Officials said the available evidence is sufficient with regard to acetaminophen and the neurological disorders that it causes, warning against it during pregnancy. We now have data we cannot ignore, Dr. Marty Markey, the Food and Drug Administration Commissioner, told the briefing in Washington. That includes a 2019 study from Boston University and Johns Hopkins University that analyzed umbilical cord plasma and determined in utero exposure to Tylenol heightened the risk of developing autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, two neurological developed disorders. A 2025 review also found evidence consistent with an association between Tylenol exposure during pregnancy and increased incidence of neurological disorders, according to Dr. Andrea Barakeli, the dean of the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, and his co-authors. So that was their evidence, okay? He said that doctors should consider minimizing the use of Tylenol during pregnancy while being aware that it's the safest over-the-counter medicine for fever and pain. You still may have to use it, but they're saying don't just do it right away. Be judicious, okay? Other experts dispute the evidence supports a link, pointing in part to a 2024 Swedish study that analyzed the records of nearly 2.5 million children and concluded there was no link between fetal Tylenol exposure and the development of autism or ADD, or ADHD, okay? So it's not clear, and I agree with that. There is a study that is in its final phases, a placebo blind, test study, the best studies possible that should tell us the truth. I thought they were premature with this announcement because that study looks like it's going to be out like this year that would tell us the truth. But here's why Trump was so adamant, and how can you blame him? Autism is a disorder with symptoms such as difficulty communicating and maintaining eye contact. About a quarter of autistic people cannot speak or are minimally verbal, according to a 2018 review of autism data. Autism rates have spiked in the United States in recent decades. The prevalence was 1 in 31 children in 2022. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention said that was up from 1 in 150 children in 2002. So in 20 years, it went from 1 in 150 to 1 in 31. Yeah, that's reason to do something. President Trump said, referenced the older numbers indicating the rate was once much lower, which was such a large increase. He said, there's something artificial causing this and we need to stop it. So I see why they did what they did, but boy, then it all blew up and everybody, Tylenol saying, it's, wrong. And oh, by the way, Tylenol, okay, which I think was owned by Unilever. Yeah, right before this announcement, they sold the Tylenol brand to this little company so that they can take all the lawsuits and stuff, okay? So, but then, here we are on the internet, right? We're always, looking for information, and guess what? Resurfaced Tylenol tweet warning women not to take any of our products while pregnant goes viral amid autism allegations. What does this mean? Well, a newly resurfaced tweet from Tylenol warning pregnant women to avoid any of our products has gone viral in mega social media circles days after President Trump announced it may be linked to autism. The 2017 post, a response to a user on what was then known as Twitter, said, "We actually don't recommend using any of our products while pregnant. Thank you for taking the time to voice your concerns." And there's a picture of it right there, okay? And so Tylenol's walking that back and saying, well, that wasn't the whole tweet and blah, blah, blah. And now they're saying that parents that have autistic children, because of that tweet and the Trump administration, may be able to start suing the manufacturer of Tylenol going forward. So I don't know, but it was something that a lot of people have been concerned about, and it is a crisis. And so President Trump acted, and I don't blame him for acting. And I hope that this study that's going to finish will back them up, or at least identify what the real cause of autism is so we can end this, because it just shouldn't be happening. Oh, by the way, in Amish communities, there's no autism. And they talked about it in a press conference. In Cuba, where they don't have the money for the medicine, so they don't have Tylenol in Cuba, there's no autism in Cuba. Just saying, okay? Just saying. Okay, now this was more good news. The Trump economy surges as consumer spending rises, trade deficit shrinks. Let's see here. Second quarter GDP has been revised up to 3.8% after the initial GDP was at 3% in July. So it went from 3% to 3.8%. That's almost 4%, folks. That's huge. Notably, the revised number now puts second quarter growth significantly higher than the forecasted 2.4% that economists predicted. The White House, hailing the news, credited the surge in economic development to President Donald Trump's tariff policies, as well as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, tax cut, deregulation, and energy abundance. America's economic resurgence under President Trump continues. Revised data now shows even stronger real GDP growth, thanks to the Trump agenda of tax cuts, and et cetera. And this is just the beginning. New data from today also shows core capital goods orders beat expectations, paving the way for robust investment growth in quarter three. President Trump pledged to make America wealthy again, and with Joe Biden's inflation crisis tamed, we are now laying the groundwork for long-term restoration of American greatness, said White House Press Secretary Kush Desai. In addition to the GDP revisions, real disposable income growth was also revised up to 3.1%. So that's how much money you make that you can spend not on things like your mortgage and electricity and stuff like that. Disposable income is up 3.1%. That's good, showing significant gains in wages and income. This marks the fastest pace of economic growth in nearly 2 years. Meanwhile, manufacturers, this is a really good one. Meanwhile, manufacturers' demand for durable goods surged in August, exceeding expectations and signaling confidence in future investments. Factory production increased for goods and services, while government output decreased, highlighting private sector-driven growth. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, small business confidence has reached the highest level in nearly a decade. New home sales also soared in August, marking a 3-year high and the strongest market for home buyers in over a decade. Now, again, the big, beautiful bill is about to kick in. So when they're talking about these small businesses, in the big, beautiful bill, there are these things where they can write off capital investments in their companies right away on their taxes. And they're already doing that in anticipation of that. And so this is helping to trigger the growth. And they're not going to expand their facilities if they're not going to hire people. So that's going to create jobs. So it's all good. And so here's a video about this to show how shocked the markets were.
Now, on the GDP side, this is our third time around the block on Q2, and we see a really solid revision, 3.8%. I'm a bit shocked, to be honest. Usually the revisions as you get to second and third become smaller and smaller. So 3.8% would be the best quarter going back to, and we have to go back a ways here, to 4.4, and that was the third quarter of 23. Now, it is important to point out that if you look at the first quarter final, down 0.5%, there's a balance there. But the balance is moving in favor, and momentum is moving in favor for better growth.
So yeah, the momentum is in favor of better growth, and that's what the 2026 election is going to be, okay? So besides, the Charlie Kirk effect and us registering religious voters, okay, the other part of it's going to be if your costs are down, your income is up, inflation is down, your kid can buy a house, all that is what wins the election. And so what are the Dems talking about, right? Newsom is talking about there may not be a 2028 election because they don't want to have an election. They're going to try to have riots to stop the election because they're going to get creamed. And because it's 80-20 issues. Trump is focused on what we, the people, want and need. We need you to get the government out of our hair. He's canceling regulations at record rates. We need to have lower interest so we can manage our money. We need better jobs and higher income. We need our costs of goods. Gasoline here in Akron, Ohio is at $2.77 a gallon. That's good news, okay? That's the way the game is played. So, it's exciting to see that's actually happening. And then this was a really interesting story. Energy Department returns $13 billion in unused climate funds to taxpayers. So this is, again, part of the debt and deficit, all right? The Energy Department has announced it will return more than $13 billion in unobligated climate funds to the Treasury, making one of the Trump administration's most significant reversals of Biden's green energy agenda. The department said on September 24th that the money was set aside under the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act enacted by Biden administration. Remember, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was basically the Green New Deal, had nothing with reducing inflation, right? Remember that scam that Joe Manchin voted for stupidly? Okay. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said the step fulfills President Donald Trump's pledge to redirect resources to the department's core mission. The American people elected President Trump largely because of the last administration's reckless spending on climate policies that fed inflation and failed to provide any real benefit to the American people. By returning these funds to the American taxpayer, now they're not going to you and I thought when I saw that headline, we were going to get a check, but we don't want a check. You got to pay down the debt. Right, and the deficit. He said, we'll be returning this to the Treasury Department. The announcement follows the passage earlier this year of the Working Families Tax Cut, which I don't remember, which directs agencies to identify and return unobligated funds. Energy officials said Wednesday the announcement meets that requirement while paving the way for a refocus on conventional energy priorities. So it's working, and the courts, the left tried to go to court and stop this, and the Supreme Court is backing Trump all the way. He's doing a great job of restoring the power of the presidency, and this is another example of that. This was really interesting. This is a controversial issue that many of you don't even know about, and maybe don't care about, so I won't spend too much time, but you need to understand this. Trump calls bluff of corporations who abuse H-1B visas. Now, many of you, if you watch Steve Bannon's podcast, you know he hates HB1 visas, and he's called it a scam, and it is a scam. If it is possible to support legal immigration, champion high-skilled talent, and still demand the abolition of the H-1B visa program, not only is it possible, it's necessary. Too often, debates over H-1 visa programs collapse into caricatures. On one side, critics are accused of xenophobia, as if skepticism of dysfunctional guest worker programs were a rejection of immigrants themselves. On the other side, supporters insist that any opposition to H-1B is tantamount to economic suicide. Neither claim survives scrutiny. The truth is that the H-1B, as currently structured, is not a merit-based system, but a corporate subsidy rife with abuse, distortion, and economic harm to American workers. A new principled approach to legally hire skilled immigration is overdue. President Trump has now sharpened the case for reform by proposing a $100,000 fee for every H-1 visa issued. So these tech companies are saying, oh, we can't find good people in America's worker pool, American citizens. We got to bring them in from India or Taiwan or South Korea, whatever. Okay? But what we found was they were not hiring Americans, and they were hiring these foreigners and paying them sub wages. That's what they were doing. It was a scam. Okay? It's a way to import poor workers who were maybe very bright, but they were then abused. So Trump is saying, okay, if these people are so critical, it must be worth $100,000 for you to put up to the U.S. government to get the visa. Well, I don't think they're going to do that, okay? This is why Trump's $100,000 annual fee proposal is so clarifying. It forces employers to reveal their motives. If they want true talent, they will pay. If they want a bargain, they will walk away. Either way, the subsidy is gone. So Trump, again, on so many fronts, is just paying attention to details. This is how you protect American jobs. This is how you protect the kids who do go to college and get a good degree in engineering or science or whatever, who are getting screwed out of jobs because we had a policy as a U.S. government that gave American companies the right to take jobs from Americans and give them to foreigners. That's how Donald Trump acts. And you need to share that with people so they understand when they say, oh, he's a fascist, he's a dictator, yada, yada, yada. It's all nonsense, okay? This was not nonsense. This was a surprise to me, but I want you to understand how serious this is. Altman, Hang, and the last-minute negotiation to seal the $100 billion OpenAI Nvidia deal. What is this about? Well, we talk about AI a lot here because it's coming and you need to understand it, okay, and its effect. But the scale of this is crazy. Sam Altman had a deadline. OpenAI CEO was headed to Texas to unveil his company's next big infrastructure push, and Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang wanted in on the action. Through a series of hurried negotiations, late night calls, and last minute contract tweaks, the two giants of artificial intelligence struck a $100 billion partnership on Monday, hours before Altman boarded the flight to Abilene, Texas, a city of about 100,000 residents, roughly 180 miles west of Dallas. That's where they're building this massive data center. And it helped that Hahn and Altman had been part of President Donald Trump's state visit to the UK a week earlier, allowing the president to be briefed on the agreement days in advance. The deal, which Hong describes to CNBC as monumental in size, marks a watershed moment in the tech industry as capital and influence are increasingly concentrated in the hands of two companies closest to the heart of artificial intelligence boom. Hong now presides over the world's most valuable public company. Nvidia, the company he started out, which was making chips for video games, is now worth $4.5 trillion after gaining $170 billion following Monday's announcement. So he pledges to invest $100 billion in OpenAI, and the stock market gave him $170 billion on Monday. Wow. Well, Homan runs the most prominent startup on the planet, valued at $500 billion. So OpenAI is worth $500 billion. OpenAI has ascent to the forefront of generative AI, has relied on Nvidia's high-powered graphics and processor units, GPUs. Now the companies are more intimately linked than ever as they plan to carve a path to jointly build the next wave of AI supercomputing facilities. This facility in Abilene, Texas, is, I don't know how many football fields it is. Massive, massive facility. So this is the concern about AI. You got Musk with all what he's doing. You got OpenAI. You got Google. And Meta with their AIs. And again, it's the oligarchs. And is there going to be regulation? Are we the people going to be protected by our elected officials? Because guess what? Trump might have been briefed on the deal, but our government has a responsibility to us to make sure what they do with that AI plant in Abilene, Texas is in the public good, is good for America and good for Americans. I'm not seeing enough of that. And we'll talk more about that as this starts to move because, folks, it's moving fast and it's scary. It's really scary. Okay. So we're going to just close with a couple of stories that are very interesting and, you know, some I think are good. Peter Strzok loses court case over his firing from the FBI. As you may remember, Peter Strzok was part of the Mueller investigation until texts between him and fellow agent Lisa Page were released. Remember that, you know, the stinky Walmart people and all that stuff. And, you know, Lisa Page, you're not going to let Trump win. Oh, no, we have an insurance proposal, right? Insurance plan, Strzok said. Well, back in 2017, you know, what they did is they reassigned Strzok to the personnel department, okay? And then after these messages came out, he was fired. And he's been fighting that firing in court since then. And the court just ruled that, you know, it wasn't politically motivated. He broke the rules, and that's why he was fired. But guess what? This is what stinks, folks. Because if you remember, Strzok said, if you come after me, I'll light you up. I will bring down everybody. You know what he got for being fired for these things with due cause? You know what the Ray FBI did? They gave him a $1.2 million settlement. And they gave Lisa Page $800,000. That's to shut them up. So we know what I think has to happen in light of James Comey indictment? The RICO charges are going to be for Russia. I think our man, Peter Strzok, needs to be indicted. Because if we go after him, I'll tell on everybody. That's what we want to see. That's what you're going to see. So I want to bring that story to you because I thought that was important. This is symbolic, but it's important to me and you. See that picture? Now, I don't know if this is the actual people who got fired, but these are FBI agents kneeling for George Floyd. And this is what happened this week. The FBI has fired agents who were photographed kneeling during a racial justice protest in Washington that followed the 2020 death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. That's a lie. This is from ABC News. He didn't die at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. That's a lie. He was railroaded. The police officer was railroaded. 3 people from Minute to Matter said Friday. The Bureau last spring had reassigned the agents, but has since fired them, said the people insisted on anonymity to discuss personal matters with the Associated Press. The number of FBI employees terminated was not immediately clear, but 2 people said it was roughly 20 people. This is important. This is a message to all the other people in the FBI that you need to take this seriously. You cannot have ideology and do your job. That's what the release of the 274 undercover cops and the after action report you can read that report, by the way, at We the People Convention. In that story, read what the agents said. They said the FBI and the DOJ are totally political. That's not us saying that. That's FBI agents in the Bureau saying that. This is symbolic. Firing those people is great, and I'm glad they did it. Just a little story. You don't hear that. You just heard it. Okay? Now, I posted on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org in the video section this highlight reel. Charlie Kirk highlight reel of his interaction with college students. It's great. It's totally not political. It is just Charlie Kirk at its finest. It's from June of 2024. Okay, I just came across it, but I wanted to give you a tool that you can use. When someone says, yeah, I heard that Charlie Kirk was a racist, or he was, homophobic, or he was, whatever, a fascist. You say, oh, listen, you're misinformed, and you need to understand that Charlie Kirk was a great American hero who didn't use violence, but used his words to try to bridge the gap. Here's a link to that video. And if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org in the video section, you'll see this video, and there's share buttons right on the page. You can click and it create a link to our page, the URL of that video, and you can text it to someone. You can email it to someone. You need to do this. You need to kill the lie that the left keeps saying that Charlie Kirk did all these things, because he didn't. He didn't. And we've been doing a good job on social media and stuff, but I wanted to give it to you in one place where it'd be easy for you to access. Okay? So please do that. Please share. That's another ask in the show. All right. Now, we're going to close the show every week now going forward with this screen that I made up. We will fulfill his mission by completing America's spiritual revival. Charlie Kirk, 1993 to 2025. I will post this at the end of every show going forward, so that we will remember. We will never forget Charlie Kirk. And we will keep working to use his the martyring of Charlie Kirk to restore American values. Okay? Because again, for those of you who are new to our podcast and you haven't followed along, you have to understand that we can't have our form of government without a moral or religious people, right? Wasn't it? I think it was John Adams when they said, what kind of country is this? It's a republic if you can keep it. Maybe that was Ben Franklin. But then there was a statement. It's a moral and you must have a moral and religious people, for this form of government is totally unsuitable for any other. Why is that? Because if you want to have a republic and you want to be governed, self-governing, right? Of the people, by the people, for the people. We in the Tea Party got this all wrong. We thought that meant you should run for office. We should help people run for office. We should vote. We should stay in touch with them when they're in office. We should help make policy. That's what self-governing is. But AG Bill Barr, who's a criminal in my opinion, and I hope he's arrested someday soon, he had a great speech at the University of Notre Dame talking about religious freedom and why our country can't exist without it. And here's why. It's real simple. I told this to a judge just the other day, and he was shocked. He said, I never heard this. You're going to hear it right now. If you can, self-governing means you keep yourself from committing crimes. If you follow the 10 Commandments, you don't cheat on your wife. You take care of your kids. You don't steal from your employer. You don't shoot your neighbor, right? The whole foundation of our government is religion. And so why does the left want to say a separation between church and state? There's no separation between church and state. That's a canard. That's made up. The left made that up, and many of you believe it. The Constitution only says there will be no state official church like they did in England, like the Church of England. That's what the Constitution says. It requires, it demands you to be Christian in your beliefs, moral in your beliefs, to live those beliefs, and hell yeah, if you're an elected official, to live those beliefs. Right? Why would you be a Christian and then go in the office and say, well, I can't use my beliefs to make this judgment. That's not what the founders said. That's not what they wanted. That's the left wants. That's the destruction of our country. So that's why this Charlie Kirk effect, this revival, isn't just religious. It's about self-governance. Because if you don't follow the 10 Commandments and you shoot your neighbor, you need police, you need courts, you need judges. If you don't follow the commandments and love your neighbor, then I have to pass laws that say you've got to turn your music down or you're going to keep your dog on a leash because you won't do it yourself. See? See? We have what we have because the foundation is built on that understanding that you will self-govern yourself, not your neighbor, not your wife. You will self-govern. And that's why we don't need government. We have huge government because we stopped doing that. Capiche? Share that. Tell your friends about that. It's a concept they don't even understand. And if you go to our website at wethepeopleconvention.org, I might put a link to it in the podcast notes this week. You can find that Bill Barr video. Just go in the search thing and type in Barr, B-A-R-R, and you should find a picture of Bill Barr addressing at University of Notre Dame. Changed my life. It woke me up. I had no idea what self-governance meant. Now I do. Now you do. Okay? All right. We're going to wrap up the podcast. As always, tell people about this podcast. We have to have you involved with us. You need to tell people about what you heard here, what you saw here. You need to go to the chapters player and share links. And if you don't like what I said, if I was wrong about something, if you want me to cover a story I didn't cover, write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. We read your emails. We respond to your emails. If you send a video link, don't just send the link. Explain what it's about, because we have to decide whether we're going to take the time to read it or not, or watch it or not, okay? So don't just send something like, here's a link. Say, this link talks about this. You may find that interesting, okay? Anyway, share this podcast. Share the stories in this podcast. And then fight for your individual freedom and liberty and prosperity, right? Fight for it. Help talk to your Christian friends and say, you got to register to vote or it doesn't matter. Satan is winning because you're not fighting him. You fight by voting. And then share the Charlie Kirk talking points videos with everyone so they understand. Okay? That's how we fight and win. I'm sure glad you decided to join us for this podcast. I hope you're glad that you joined us. I hope that you will be back next week. I hope that you have a good week. I hope that you're enjoying the weather. I know there's a hurricane maybe coming on the East Coast. You guys on the East Coast, our members there, look out. Enjoy football season. Enjoy the baseball season that's winding up. Enjoy your life. But remember that it's not like we don't have to do something. We're not spectators. We're participants. Okay? You must participate in our protecting and defending our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay. I'm going to wrap it up. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you and yours, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Pray for Donald Trump and all of his aides, because they are fighting the fight of our lives. Okay? See you next week.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, the same.